North Atlantic, September 12, 1942. The sea is black glass, endless, and cold. The moon hides behind clouds, and somewhere beneath the surface, a steel predator waits. Inside U-156, the air tastes of diesel and sweat. Every man knows the rhythm of the ocean by heart. The groan of the hull, the heartbeat of the engines, the soft whisper of sonar pings echoing through metal. At 6 p.m., the periscope breaks the surface. Kapitän Lieutenant Werner Hartenstein leans close, his eyes sharp and calm. A large ship silhouetted against the twilight, no escort, no flag, just another target on the endless list. He lowers the scope. Torpedo, loss. Two white streaks vanish into the dark. Moments later, impact. A dull explosion. Then another. The ship, RMS Laconia, lurches violently. Fire blossoms across her decks. Through the periscope, Hartenstein watches tiny figures running, falling, jumping into the sea. Another Allied vessel lost, another point in the tonnage war. But then, something he doesn't expect. Voices, dozens, hundreds. The wind carries them across the waves. Cries for help in English and Italian. Italian? The realization hits like ice. Among the dying are 1,800 Italian prisoners of war, his own country's allies. The radio operator looks at him, waiting for orders to dive. Silence. Hartenstein stands motionless, his hands resting on the edge of the chart table. He knows what mercy costs at sea. A surface U-boat is a dead U-boat. Aircraft patrol the skies. Destroyers listen for the faintest echo. But the sound outside isn't just noise, it's human. He looks through the periscope again. The ocean is burning. Rafts drift through the flames, men clinging to debris, the water red with oil. The war has turned the sea into a graveyard. At 8 p.m., Hartenstein gives an order no one expects. Surface. Prepare to assist survivors. For a moment, no one moves. The chief engineer blinks, uncertain he's heard right. Assist, sir? Yes. Bring them aboard. The U-boat rises through the waves, breaking the surface with a hiss of foam. Men pour onto the deck, throwing ropes into the freezing water. British sailors, their hands blue with cold, reach up in disbelief. German hands pull them aboard. No one fires. No one shouts. The only sound is the sea and the gasping of men who should be enemies. In the cramped interior, survivors are wrapped in blankets, given coffee, whatever rations the crew can spare. Someone mutters, "We're saving the enemy." Another answers quietly, "No, we're saving men." Above them, Hartenstein stands on the bridge, coat whipping in the wind. The Atlantic stretches in every direction, vast, silent, and watching. He knows this will be his death if they're discovered, but he also knows something else. Sometimes the only way to stay human in war is to disobey it. The ocean in 1942 was not blue. It was iron gray. A battlefield with no borders, where the enemy could be anywhere, even beneath your feet. By that year, the Battle of the Atlantic had become a war of endurance. Britain was bleeding. Its lifeline, merchant convoys, stretched across thousands of miles of hostile water, hunted day and night by German U-boats. Every ton of fuel, every sack of flour, every human soul heading to Europe passed through a gauntlet of steel and salt. For the men of the Kriegsmarine, life inside a submarine was a test of the human mind. No sunlight, no space, no escape. Weeks underwater, air thick with oil and tension. A single mistake, one ping too loud, one valve turned too late, and the ocean would crush them like an empty can. The doctrine was simple: strike, sink, disappear. No mercy, no rescue. The sea was the only witness. But Kapitän Leutnant Werner Hartenstein wasn't built entirely from that doctrine. Born in Würzburg, a career naval officer, he had spent years mastering the science of underwater warfare. Yet his crew knew their captain carried something dangerous on board: empathy. When U-156 left its base at Lorient in late August 1942, it was part of the deadly monsoon patrols, long-range missions across the equator, hunting Allied shipping lanes. Hartenstein's orders were clear: intercept, destroy, report, nothing more. But on September 12th, his torpedoes found a target he never meant to claim: the RMS Laconia, a 20,000-ton British liner repurposed for war. On paper, an enemy transport, a legitimate target. In reality, a floating maze of humanity. British officers, Polish guards, civilians, and over 900 Italian prisoners of war locked in the cargo holds. The explosion ripped through her hull just after sunset. Within an hour, she was sinking fast. Lifeboats capsized in the chaos. Men screamed in English, Italian, even German. The sea didn't care about their flags. From the surface, the view was hell. Oil fires painted the sky orange. Bodies drifted through black water. The smell of burning paint and diesel hung in the air. Inside the control room of U-156, the crew waited for the order to dive. Instead, Hartenstein stood silent. He could hear it. The voices. Not through sonar, not through instruments, but through the hull itself. The ocean was crying. At 8 p.m., he broke every rule of submarine warfare. Surface the boat. The U-boat rose like a steel ghost through the fire-lit waves. The crew flooded onto the deck with ropes and ladders. Within minutes, they were hauling men out of the water: Allied soldiers, terrified civilians, even Italians clinging to wooden boards. By dawn, over 90 survivors were aboard, shivering and silent. Hartenstein ordered the engines stopped. They were no longer hunters. They were lifeboat. He sent a message, not encrypted, not hidden. If any ship will assist the survivors of the Laconia, I will not attack, providing I am not attacked. It was a message that stunned every listening radio operator from Dakar to London. A German submarine, revealing its position to save its enemies. For now, the sea was calm, but above the clouds the hunters were already coming. American bombers, listening to the same open frequency. And none of them knew that mercy had surfaced on the Atlantic that night. Dawn breaks over the Atlantic like a wound reopening. The storm has passed, but the sea still heaves with the memory of violence. From the deck of U-156, the horizon is littered with wreckage, life rafts, barrels, and bodies drifting silently among the swells. By morning, Werner Hartenstein's U-boat has rescued nearly 100 survivors. Men in soaked uniforms lie across the steel deck, their faces pale and cracked from the cold. Some whisper prayers, some simply stare. Hartenstein stands on the bridge, binoculars in hand, scanning the horizon. He knows this can't last. A surfaced submarine is a target, visible from miles away. One sighting, one aircraft, and everyone aboard is dead. Still, he refuses to dive. He has already broken every rule in the book. What difference would one more make? At 10 a.m., a new sound cuts through the static. Morse signals from another U-boat. U-506, under Kapitän Leutnant Erich Würdemann, has received Hartenstein's message and is heading toward the scene. A third, U-507, commanded by Haroschacht, confirms the same. Even an Italian submarine, Comandante Capellini, changes course to assist. It's unthinkable. Multiple Axis submarines surfacing together in enemy waters, risking exposure, not to attack, but to save. The Atlantic hasn't seen anything like it. By nightfall, 4 submarines float side by side, decks crowded with survivors. German sailors build makeshift shelters from tarps. Others pass tin cups of coffee, share bread, and wrap shivering men in naval blankets. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Enemies huddled together under the same sky, waiting for help that might never come. Among the rescued are British soldiers, Polish guards, and Italian POWs, all mixed together, too weak to fight, too cold to hate. One British officer, still trembling, salutes Hartenstein. The captain returns the gesture. A German radio man takes a deep breath and transmits a second message. Rescuing survivors of the Laconia. Please advise ships to render assistance. Have hundreds aboard. Am towing lifeboats. Displaying Red Cross. For a moment, it feels like the world might actually listen. Hartenstein orders a large Red Cross flag painted on the deck and draped over the conning tower. The symbol is meant to protect hospitals, medics. And now, a submarine full of enemies. He knows it's fragile. The ocean doesn't care about flags. But he has no choice but to trust in decency, a dangerous thing to trust in 1942. The 4 U-boats form a strange convoy, towing lifeboats filled with survivors. It's an image of chaos and compassion, rolling through waves that have never known mercy. Inside, the crew works without rest. Men who used to load torpedoes now hold crying civilians. A cook tears his only blanket in half to give to an English nurse. The chief engineer rigs a pump to heat water for the wounded. Someone jokes weakly, "Maybe we'll win the war with kindness." No one laughs. For 2 days, the strange flotilla drifts through the mid-Atlantic, waiting for Allied ships to respond. Hartenstein sends messages in plain English. "If any ship will assist, we will not attack." But the replies never come. What does come instead has wings. On the morning of September 16th, a lookout spots a dark shape in the sky. A U.S. B-24 Liberator patrol bomber approaching fast from the west. Hartenstein breathes out. Finally, rescue. He orders flares fired, red signal rockets, the universal sign of humanitarian assistance. The Red Cross flag flaps in the wind, bright and visible. He watches the bomber circle once, twice, as if inspecting the scene. Then the bomb bay doors open. The bomber circles once more. Hartenstein shields his eyes against the glare, scanning the sky. The sun glints off the Liberator's wings as it banks sharply, lining up for another pass. On the deck of U-156, hundreds of survivors look up, waving frantically. British officers hold up makeshift flags, screaming over the wind, "We're survivors, don't shoot." The Red Cross banner sprawls across the hull, bright against gray steel. The submarine is motionless, engines idle, surrounded by lifeboats and oil-streaked water. And yet, the bomber dives. "Alarm!" The shout echoes through the control room. Sailors rush to the deck guns, but Hartenstein raises a hand. "No, hold your fire." He refuses to return fire against rescuers. This is a humanitarian zone. At least it's supposed to be. The B-24 roars overhead, bomb bay open. A whistle cuts the air. Then, impact. The first depth charge detonates 100 meters off the bow, sending a wall of water over the deck. Survivors scream, clutching the rails as another explosion follows. Lifeboats flip. The sea turns white with foam and chaos. Hartenstein's voice cuts through the panic. "Get below! Cut the tow lines!" The submarine jerks violently as the crew scrambles to release the rafts tied behind them. Men in the water are thrown back by the blast, disappearing into spray. Another explosion. This one closer. The U-boat shudders. Alarms blare. Inside, lights flicker red. A pressure valve bursts, spraying steam into the control room. The chief engineer shouts, "Hull breach on the aft deck! We can't stay up!" Hartenstein grips the periscope rail. "We still have survivors aboard. If we dive, they'll drown. If we don't, we all die." It's the cruelest equation he's ever faced: survival or mercy. He hesitates for only a moment. Then he gives the order no one wants to hear. "Prepare to dive." The deck erupts in chaos. Sailors drag survivors off the hatches, shouting for them to let go. Some refuse. One British officer screams, "You can't leave us," as the hatch seals shut. The diesel engines die. Silence. Then the low hum of ballast tanks flooding. U-156 begins to sink beneath the waves, leaving hundreds of men clinging to rafts, staring into the churned water where their rescuers just vanished. Inside the sub, the noise fades, replaced by the sound of depth charges detonating above, muffled through hundreds of feet of seawater. Each one could be the last. Hartenstein stands at the navigation table, drenched, trembling. He knows the American pilot couldn't have known. Or maybe he did. Maybe the fog of war had consumed everything, even mercy. When the explosions finally stop, he surfaces again. The sky is empty. All around, wreckage, silence, oil. The Red Cross flag is shredded, flapping weakly in the wind. On the horizon, no ships, no planes. Just the Atlantic, swallowing the dead. Hartenstein stares at the same sea he tried to defy. He's a soldier, but in this moment he feels something deeper than defeat. He's seen the cost of compassion in a world that no longer believes in it. He whispers, almost to himself, "God forgive us all." For the rest of that patrol, U-156 carries the ghosts of those left behind, floating in memory just beneath the surface. The Atlantic stayed silent after the attack. For hours, U-156 drifted half-submerged, engines quiet, crew stunned. No one spoke. The smell of burnt oil seeped through the vents, clinging to everything. Above them, the sea rolled with debris, rafts, shattered planks, and men who had once trusted them to save their lives. By dusk, it is over. The survivors still alive on the surface were later picked up by Vichy French ships, drawn by the last distress calls. Hundreds were lost. Hartenstein's attempt at mercy had ended in blood and wreckage. Word of the Laconia incident spread quickly, first across the Allied command, then through the Kriegsmarine itself. To Berlin, the event was a disaster. A U-boat commander had surfaced, revealed his position, broadcast in plain English, and risked the secrecy of the entire U-boat fleet, all to save the enemy. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's submarine forces, read the reports with cold disbelief. He admired Hartenstein's skill, but not his decision. To him, war was a machine, efficient, mathematical, and merciless. Emotions were cracks in its armor. On September 17, 1942, Dönitz issued what would become one of the most infamous orders of the war. No attempt of any kind must be made at rescuing survivors of sunken ships. The message was sent to every U-boat in the Atlantic. No food, no water, no towing lifeboats, no exceptions. The Laconia Order, as it became known, killed the last vestiges of chivalry at sea. From that moment, the ocean turned back into what it had always wanted to be, a place without mercy. Hartenstein never defended himself. In his war diary, recovered after the conflict, he wrote only, "I could not let them die that way." He knew he crossed a line his superiors could never forgive, the line between obedience and humanity. In the months that followed, the U-boat crews grew even more isolated. No one surfaced for survivors again. Convoys turned more dangerous, Allied aircraft more relentless. Every submarine knew the story of the man who tried to do good, and how it ended. But among the sailors, the whispers remained. They spoke of U-156, of the night she rose from the depths to save the drowning, of the British soldiers who saluted their enemy as brothers. It became a kind of myth, a flicker of conscience in a war that had forgotten what that meant. When the war ended, Dönitz himself was tried at Nuremberg. The Laconia order resurfaced in evidence, cold, bureaucratic, written in precise German. The irony was cruel. The order that forbade mercy was now used to prove guilt. Dönitz defended it as a necessary military precaution. The judges didn't agree. As for Werner Hartenstein, his story ended 6 months after Laconia. In March 1943, U-156 was sunk by an American patrol plane near Barbados. There were no survivors, no memorial, no medals, just coordinates on a map, a dot where mercy drowned with him. But for the men who heard his voice that night over the radio, Allied and German alike, he left something behind. A reminder that even in a world consumed by hatred, a single act of compassion could still terrify the powerful. The war would go on. Thousands more would die. But the story of one submarine that surfaced to save its enemies refused to sink. The war ended, but the ocean kept its secrets. In 1946, the Atlantic was quiet again, too quiet. Convoys no longer cut through the waves. No sonar pings, no torpedo trails. Only rusting wrecks beneath the surface, each holding stories the world had already forgotten. Among them lay U-156, somewhere off the coast of Barbados, 800 meters below. No graves, no markers, just silence. For years, the story of the Laconia incident drifted through history like wreckage. The Allies recorded it in their reports, but never celebrated it. The Germans remembered it with discomfort. It was an act that didn't fit anywhere. Too human for a war built on obedience. Werner Hartenstein's name disappeared from official bulletins. He wasn't condemned, but he wasn't honored either. In post-war Germany, there was no place for a man who had tried to be merciful. Compassion had become a liability, something people pretended not to notice in the aftermath of total war. But the survivors remembered. British sailors who lived because of Hartenstein's decision wrote about it in their memoirs. One of them, Lieutenant Thomas Mortimer, described the scene in his diary. "We were dead men floating, and then a miracle surfaced from the sea, a German submarine. The captain gave us coffee, he gave us blankets, he gave us life." Another survivor, an Italian POW, later told his grandchildren, "The Germans saved me, the Americans killed us." It wasn't bitterness. It was truth, carved into memory by the sea itself. In the 1950s, historians began piecing together the fragments, intercepted transmissions, eyewitness accounts, declassified naval records. The picture that emerged was clear. Hartenstein had acted entirely on his own conscience, no orders, no approval. Just a man choosing decency in a place where it didn't belong. His family received no medal, no recognition, only silence. But among sailors, especially those who served beneath the waves, his name became legend. U-boat veterans spoke of him with quiet respect, the one who remembered we were still human. In 1972, 30 years after the tragedy, French divers located what they believed to be the wreck of U-156. The hull was mostly intact, resting on the seabed, coated in coral and rust. No official recovery was made. The site remains undisturbed, a steel tomb for a man who defied the ocean and his orders. The sea doesn't keep monuments, only echoes. But sometimes that's enough. On the surface, the world moved on. New wars, new enemies, new headlines. But deep below, in the cold pressure of the Atlantic, the story of a submarine that surfaced to save its enemies still lingers, whispering through the dark. Because even after the guns fall silent, the ocean remembers. It remembers the night when mercy surfaced and the world looked away. The sea doesn't judge. It buries heroes and killers in the same salt. It erases the flags, the uniforms, the reasons. All that remains is silence, and what a man chose to do before it took him. Werner Hartenstein didn't change the course of the war. He didn't win a battle, seize a city, or command an armada. He simply surfaced when every rule, every instinct, every piece of military logic told him not to. And for that, his name was almost erased. But maybe that's how these things survive, not in parades or textbooks, but in whispers, passed down through stories told decades later. A German captain who saved British sailors, an act of mercy that ended in fire, a man who chose to be human when it mattered most. In every war, there's a moment when someone has to decide what kind of person they are, the obedient one, or the one who listens to his conscience. Hartenstein's choice didn't save him. It didn't save his crew. But it proves something that outlasts every victory. Compassion can exist even at the bottom of hell. History often celebrates the victors, but sometimes it's the ones who lose, and lose everything, who remind us what victory should mean. The Laconia incident wasn't about strategy or survival. It was about the collision between humanity and the machinery of war. And what happens when one man refuses to let that machinery define him? Today, the wreck of U-156 lies silent beneath the Atlantic. No flag flies above it, no anthem plays. But somewhere down there, in the stillness, rests the memory of a night when the impossible happened. When mercy surfaced in a sea built for killing. And maybe that's enough. Because the truth of war isn't written in medals or orders. It's written in moments, fleeting, fragile, almost invisible, when someone remembers what it means to be human. Hartenstein didn't survive the war, but mercy did. It slipped beneath the waves with him, and somehow it's still floating. In every story told, every monument unbuilt, every quiet pause when we wonder what we would have done in his place. Sometimes mercy survives longer than victory.